Bipartisan legislation has been introduced by Democrat Congressman Josh Gottheimer and Republican Congressman LaHood to ban DeepSeek from government devices. Like TikTok, national security and espionage risks are their major concerns here. Congressman Gottheimer and Congressman LaHood join us this morning. And gentlemen, thank you for being here. This kind of follows the playbook of what we originally saw with TikTok. What are your concerns here? What are you thinking? And Congressman Gottheimer, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Becky. I think Darren and I are concerned with what most Americans should be concerned about with DeepSeek and the Chinese government literally putting into their code an ability to capture data on Americans, on their searches, on their private, and on either private documents that they're using DeepSeek for. It's now the #1 downloaded app on Apple. So we think not only should all Americans know about what the Chinese government is doing here and using the way they're using DeepSeek, but also make sure from a national security perspective, and Darren and I are on the Intelligence Committee, making sure that no government employee is using DeepSeek on their phones, on their devices to do any kind of searching that could help the Chinese government.
Congressman LaHood, we should make the distinction between using the model itself and downloading the app. Using the model itself, you can change things, you can put protections and build security into it. I think there have been questions that have been raised about whether some of that information on the app is going back to China Telecom and some other issues along this way. Do you know anything, or you just feel like this is a situation where there's the potential for security to be compromised?
Well, we come from this from the national security aspect, both serving on the Intelligence Committee. I also serve on our Select Committee on China. If you start with the predicate that China has a plan to replace the United States, they're working at it every single day. They want to beat us technologically, militarily, economically, diplomatically. And you've seen pattern after pattern of CCP-related companies that steal data, steal information, steal our intellectual property, abide by a different set of rules and standards than every other industrialized country in the world. This is another example of that. DeepSeek has been banned in lots of other countries already, Australia, South Korea, Italy. It's long overdue that we really question what they're doing, and we protect American citizens.
How do you feel about where things stand with TikTok right now? I mean, that was a process that started a while ago. How do you feel with TikTok versus DeepSeek and the process to try and ban it where it stands right now? I guess we're in the 75-day waiting period to see if there's a deal that can be had.
Well, if you look at the overwhelming bipartisan support to ban TikTok, I think that speaks for itself. But also look at the national security team that President Trump has put together, from John Radcliffe to Elise Stefanik to J.D. Vance to Marco Rubio. You know, Rubio, Vance, Stefanik all supported the TikTok ban. So did Mike Waltz. This morning, President Trump, it's been reported he's putting J.D. Vance in charge of that, and Mike Waltz. I think we'll get to a resolution on this, and it won't be good for TikTok.
Congressman, I'll ask both of you. We had Ro Khanna on the broadcast. Well, we had him just a couple of days ago, but a couple of weeks ago, he effectively said that, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the conversation you're having right now about TikTok is a lie. That's what he basically said. He basically said that he's seen the intelligence and that it is a lie, that there's to the extent that TikTok is actually taking that information, giving it to the Chinese government, or the Chinese government is using TikTok in some kind of nefarious way today. That's not to say that prospectively in the future it couldn't, and that's clearly a possibility. And if we want to say that that's a threat, that will always be a threat. But that the idea that the American public has been told repeatedly that TikTok is doing something nefarious in this moment is not true. What do you say to that?
Listen, I didn't see Ro's comments, but I'll tell you, and both serving on the Intelligence Committee, and the fact that you saw an overwhelming number of congressmen and women come out immediately and ban it,
because
right.
he basically said it was part of a, he said it was an election campaign. He said it was a campaign, meaning there's a lot of people who have just gone along with this, arguably because I don't know what to say, xenophobia. There's just been a lot of different sort of arguments that have been made about this issue, but almost no detail has been suggested publicly about nefarious behavior today. And I'm not here to defend TikTok. I'm just saying, show us the receipts.
I was going to say, Andrew, I was going to say that overwhelmingly after getting intelligence briefings, and obviously we can't discuss all of what we've seen on the Intelligence Committee, but I'll tell you this, there's a reason why it was so overwhelming, and you know it's not easy to get a huge, immediate, bipartisan vote on something, and I believe that's why, based on the information we've seen, that people acted so quickly. Listen, and as Darren pointed out, which I think is spot on, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has one intention. They're our #1 adversary, and their intention is to spew disinformation and to ensure that our democracy's best days are behind us, not ahead of us. Obviously, we believe we've got to do everything we can to protect our country, and especially to ensure that the Chinese Communist Party is not using disinformation or collecting data on Americans to try to undermine our country. Both in the case of DeepSeek is where we see concerns. I think we both saw that in the case of TikTok, and I think it's overwhelming and clear.
I would just make one point. The same argument that Roe is making and that you alluded to is the same thing they said about Huawei a number of years ago. We found out that was false and not true. Huawei blatantly is involved with the CCP, stealing our intellectual property, stealing our privacy rights. That's why you've seen almost a complete ban of Huawei. It's the same argument. There's no evidence to trust CCP-related entities, whether it's TikTok, whether it's DeepSeek, whether it's Huawei.
I'll ask, is anyone on your staff using DeepSeek? Have they checked it out? And by the way, gentlemen, do either of you allow your kids to use TikTok?
I have 3 teenage boys. I do not allow them to use TikTok.
And there's certainly no one in my office using DeepSeek, I'll tell you that much.
What's the plan? Do you think that you have a lot of support, bipartisan support in Congress for this?
Absolutely. You know, we just introduced this legislation. We already have 20 original co-sponsors. I think similar to what you saw with TikTok bill, you know, there's going to be a lot of people interested in this. Our Select Committee on China is going to hold a hearing on this also, and I think we're going to continue to build support for it.
And the more information that comes out on this, I think you're going to see more members of Congress jump on, right, just like they did with TikTok.
One other point I want to say, it's interesting on DeepSeek. I want to mention one thing on DeepSeek. You're not going to find any criticism of Xi Jinping, the Communist Chinese Party, anything related to Taiwan in China. So again, it's screening the content of what goes on there. That should tell you everything.
And gentlemen, very quickly on TikTok, I know you think that this will be resolved quickly. How do you think it ends? With a purchase of an American company, or the U.S. government taking ownership of some part of the stake? Or do you think that this is something where it's no longer allowed to operate in the United States?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the president has put J.D. Vance in charge of this with Mike Waltz. Obviously, J.D. Vance comes from that world with a prior tech background. You know, I think, you know, we'll see what they come up with over the next month or so here, but I think it'll be resolved. And
it has to, I think it has to be resolved, right? This is nothing that, this can't hang out there, as we've talked about. We know what their intentions are.
Congressman Gottheimer, Congressman LaHood, thank you both for joining us this morning.